TRM Office 5521, Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, private office. We are living a moment full of turbulence, and this turbulence is caused by decision and speech made and prepared kind of to have this kind of turbulence as something which points as the use or the preparation for something horrible. Today is 29 Friday. I must update the diary, and then we will have in mind that the first thing was the Kevin Florence model. As the research something independent, and we could check that the distortion inside a linear perception as exponential behavior, and considering a reversal sense inside these linear things such a stretch so big that indeed this creates a disruptive event. The second thing that we could observe is that this can happen inside the security system as benefits paid on Europe by the immigrant flow, replacing the labor and such a big pressure until have strikes and crises at the labor ship market. In the same way, this can happen inside a company like the IBM, when you have a lot of unfairness and situations inside that you can't sustain anymore, and then we will have losses or failures at the control, and then you create the need as investment, and the investor will be the receiver of the diverted money using your budget. And we can trace this, and we consider at that time do the optimization as the database Sigma. I'm not part of the company, I'm independent. I tried the chair as director, but I was refused. In the same way on Nissan I was refused, and then but they kept the movement because I believe in what to do, and I believe that criminal scams are all made to be flunked. Then we will have the cluster of information as relational association as debit and credit, which indeed has an interface. If I have a flow, I must have the same reversal flow doing a regressive analysis. If I do not have this, I must have the interruption and segment this space and drill down and do the depuration. This is something that we can observe and will allow us to understand that the relation of coalitions indeed with supported by migration of modified data pointing to corruption, public and corporate, and criminal association by failured segments which allow them to have any kind of gain, including the structural design as domain of circumstance with an image and the operational level very explicit, which will be blamed, and then they will kind of point the second level as image, and the domain will continue. Are acting as white-collar crime, tax evasion, and financial evasion, impacting the immaterial property by piracy and other areas, and all these as the bottom of the operational level at the transnational organized crime, which is the laundry money, and the bottom of the transnational organized crime in an interconnected way as transcontinental level is the cybercrime. And this kind of things allowed us to have on present time the issue with criminal purpose or interest presented inside the academic space under variance according with circumstances that are created or set to have this, and then you have the gain in a lot of things. We are using the database Sigma as approach, the database as a database to do not have the unique dependence and need as use a single big data structure or design we could have this model, which indeed is the Brazil failure, 2012 up to 2021, presenting the new tiers, new trades, the interval segmented, international events on it, international scams on it, Brazil on silence about all this, violating the Constitution. Article 174 is the program and the public administration committed with the criminal scams. If the silence association is a piece of it, yes. And they are all integrated as failure at the public corruption. Yes, if you have this on Article 74 and 10381, despite you consider change the law and the consequence by you, considering the crimes committed by you, of course that the Constitution is quite clear. If this happens as a contract side to side with international player, the international player can have the punishment against the other side of this contract, which is a Brazilian authority or an institution full of Brazilian authorities compromised with the organized crime. Even if they put the local crime down, considering that you will be a big mafia members, then they will be persecuted and under trial and investigation in an international way. Considering, for instance, a contract Brazil-USA, Brazil so failured and so subjugated by vices, by corruption, by a lot of things, the American judicial power will have the punishment against the Brazilian variables inside a contract with an American company. And this was the idea of the scam. This is the idea, as you could have in the same way, presenting the argument as have fields, and those fields are kind of distortion inside the environment, which is regular, and they are equal if it's an entire failure or a failure at the specific institution with make decision power. This will put them at the same kind of trial, considering that the public corruption is something more serious. Then we will have the possibility of agreements and plea bargain. Consider a regressive model. The minor offender will give the big offender that will bring the institutions that have criminal members, especially from the top level, have a decision to support the criminal activity in a transcontinental way, implying the security and the data asset at the public area, because we had a mandatory need as habeas data in Brazil to protect public data inside the public department by crimes committed by public variables advantage. It's on our transnational organized crime law 12,850, article 1 and up to 3. And they will kind of have this possibility, and these institutions, if do not offer them, which imply themselves at the top level, we are just evidencing what kind of people we are dealing with. And in the same way, if has an institution or an agreement or a security for Brazil, let's say, America must apply the consequence legal against their home offenders, and will apply against the Brazilian institution that will be severed, that will be under closed door procedure, considering authority with special types of legitimacy to observe if we have the financing as the financing system, investment system, a clandestine way of use as public department, treasury and budget to support criminal purpose as terrorism and a lot of things. And you are not legal or loyal according to the article 174, the whole failure, because America has a piece of NATO and Brazil is an extra line. Then we have a relation very like a brotherhood with Portugal, which is a part of the NATO in the same way, and for sure they wouldn't like to have the brotherhood with a criminal conjuncture. Portugal and Europe, you must have the same strike against criminal offenders at the top level, or you will have no legitimacy to apply the consequence against corruption in a side-to-side situation, because indeed you are acting without equity and equality. You are kind of being a coward. Wealth, if you get rich and wealth and the price is your silence, this is oppression, this is not wealth. Then this model is the model for punishment assessed by a machine. You have the incremental level of distortion from corruption to violation. Corruption and violation, doing both, is exactly what you did and what you are doing at my communication area and consuming. By the Brazilian law, we have as the thing and can put everything against you. Brazilian institution and criminal offenders inside. You have no answer and no solution because it's all for real. You committed crimes, you committed industrial crimes, you committed serious violation, and you are unable to assume this because you are a coward, shaking on your boots, and then you sent to jail, maybe spending your next 20 years in America federal prison. We had this model yesterday considering the energy by the new tracer T. The association that we have, considering for instance the epsilon, the x as the speech, and the z as the variance inside my variable. Indeed, we'll give them like this. The thematic panel is the energy. It will be the variable x with a function at the economy as the energy sector. Sectorial functionalities can happen in all areas. I had levels as distortions considering a single node and the perception that the distribution as all economic resources are something like this. We are kind of have the presentation of this argument here at the curve, and it's crossed like this, but you will got associated with the curve as estimative, which is the speech, and this speech has kind of levels of density, and those levels of density are happening inside the space as notation, which is the variable affecting my curve at this point here. If I highlight this point here, and for instance, if you have another situation, I will have a segmentation. Then I will use this segmentation, as you can observe, inside the field of speech as distortion, to interrupt the thing and have the depuration as an interval notation. And I will try to understand if the movement inside this interval, considering the speech, which is very, very linked with us, I will ask the thematic panel to understand the decision as variables and how these impact the stability of the functional system by the sectorial failure segmented, which can be positive one, but indeed it's not like this, or we are not having this situation. But sometimes you do the migration of modifier data, and I must have this. This value positive 1 can be negative 1 in the same way, and indeed this failure can be 0, 0 confirmed as positive 1 as criminal, or negative 1 infiltrated agents, or decisions that you have, for instance, at the CEO of IBM under oppression system, and then you had a lot of decisions that put the company down and the American security down, impacting the security for Brazil USA, and allowing the Brazil to have the strike against this kind of behavior at America. And the complementarity of both will help us to understand that if the Center of Invest America is corrupted, they can have decision against corruption. If the Brazil is public, the public area, won't have decision against corruption. The integration of both allowed us to have decision against the entire systemic crime. We are doing this. This model here, as you can observe in an extended way, this curve as my estimative curve will continue here at this area here, something like this. You know, this curve here as the x will continue here as something like this, and this curve here as my function will continue as something like this. I will have that the stress made by the speech inside the variable impacting the factorial behavior, the segmented behavior inside my sectorial function can be presented now as something with exponential behavior, which can be a negative curve or a positive curve. It will be according with the circumstance, and this will present the trend as orientation. If you have the exponential behavior as speech inside the linear segment, by the interests obtain advantage or create crisis to set a civil war in global scale, of course that is trending -1. If is the opposite, is reduce, have the exponential, the logarithmic behavior of this current speech, then you will kind of reduce the stress as exponential inside until put the curve in a status quo. This segmented here indeed will have a projection here as something like this, which will be a reversal behavior, and I will have the movement of my curve as something like this, you know, as a positive curve, because you are obtaining advantage by this kind of loss inside the sectorial functionality fully failured. A here, A here is something at the origin, and it will have a raising, will raise your behavioral functional distribution of notation inside the chart. Here is the opposite, and here in the same way we will observe that this speech here indeed will be here. And for instance, if you have the gain here, consider this movement, we will have the gain, we will have the gain here by this movement, which imply the loss at regular system. We will have this functional movement here as the association as something negative to put you down in the same way. You know, we'll have the cross, the insertion inside your gain, and then your gain will reduce, pointing you to this segment that will indicate the decisions and the segment that this had been going until have the thematic payment. This is a full model for regressive analysis, not the one to put you all in jail. I don't like people, you know, like you all. You are all evidenced at the covine anything, and if unfortunately our authorities didn't have the courage to put you on jail. You are all evil, you are all cowards. We will observe if the NATO will have the same situation. Mr. Stuttenberg, in the same way we had this conversation with the Interpol, with the FBI, with others, especially in Brazil, but Brazil declared and confirmed themselves at the public area, especially inside the criminal scam. Now they must face these consequences as criminal offenders. Have a nice weekend.